don't think he'd mind me telling you that. And he continues to contribute an enormous amount of music. And but in those days, there was very little that was of a fairly contemporary nature for young bands. And so I got into writing for my own groups. And that was where my career really began as a composer of music for young bands. Writing things that worked with my kids, that I found that they responded well to things that were rhythmically challenging. The piece we did today, you know, was 4/4, 2/4, 3/4. 3/4s were really 6/8. Very complex rhythmically, but students at this age can do that very well. That's one of their real strong suits. They have a lot of energy, and they're able to portray rhythmic excitement very well. It wasn't until I got involved with the Yamaha Band Student that I really was able to take all of this background of teaching and writing for young bands and put it together into something that I'm very proud of. You received a packet when you came in today that has the clarinet book 1 and book 2 of the method, plus an ensemble book. We will be dealing with that ensemble book later in the workshop, but we're going to start off with the method itself. And if you would, just to get out the clarinet book. The Yamaha Band Student is a method in 3 levels. They all have a common connection in the way that they are designed. If you open up to pages 4 and 5, where the book really begins, you'll notice that there's a box of material at the top of the page where all of the new material that's introduced to the students is represented. That's a continuing thread throughout the method. And I also would hope that when you look at that, you see a few pages of music that would be quite appealing to students. What we have to remember is that quite often when we start off beginners, we're not only teaching them how to put a clarinet together, how to form an embouchure, we're also teaching them a new language. We can't assume that they know the language of music. And as a composer and as a publisher, I'm particularly aware of developing materials that are not only musically satisfying, but are also visually stimulating to a young student. So many of our method books are just too cluttered with material, all these little notes that are really for the teacher. Things for the teacher to remind them how to teach, but are not necessarily applicable to the student. The whole design of the Yamaha Band Student is to make something that's more appealing to the student. But even with a clean design like that, it's difficult, I think, to start off with your beginning band and immediately go into a method book. And I would encourage you to do what I did. I used to spend a lot of time with my beginners doing rote material before we'd actually started the book. I have the advantage, perhaps, of being able to play the piano well enough that I could use it as a teaching tool. And I always did use it in my classroom. I had an old junky upright piano, but it worked pretty well. And I would try to make musical experiences with my students right away. And just to show you the types of things we do, I'd like the clarinets just to play an open G for me. Just play open G whole notes. This time. 1, 2, 3, and. Try to sit at the piano. What we have to do as teachers, we have to make them feel that they're making music. You know, it's easy to get them into the band because they see those shiny instruments and they watch the marching band, but then you get them there, and too often our first experiences are just pure frustration. You know, we're trying to get a sound out of this instrument, we're trying to read music. I would do a lot of things that would just create music, teach them songs by rote. First 5 notes you're going to learn on a clarinet are going to be C, D, E, F, G. Whether it's you learn an E, D, C, or E, F, G, or if they're the first 5 notes, doesn't matter if you're using my method or anyone else's method. And there's a lot of songs that can be taught to beginners with those beginning notes. Now, once you've gotten over that, you've made some music, then we start in the method book. And the problem with method books is that we have a limited amount of material students can play. And so we have pretty boring material. We try to dress it up a little bit in the Yamaha band students by having the percussion do something different than the winds. Because percussion players can't start off playing whole notes, obviously, because they can't roll right away, but they can play quarter notes and half notes. So the beginning exercises have the winds playing whole notes and the percussion playing quarter. We'd like to play on page 4, and you can follow with this, line number 1 on page 4. All the band directors had a hard time getting out of Keyboard 101. Here they are, right here, front row. These are the guys. They're the ones. And they have chord symbols written. Like that one has B flat, G minor, B flat. If you know the B flat chord, F7, E flat, G minor, maybe a secondary dominant or two, you can get by. And the way this came about is that in a prior band method that I wrote, I would go out and do clinics and I'd always play the piano. People said, where do you get those piano parts from? Well, I'm just kind of harmonizing as I go along. They said, boy, it'd really be nice to have that in the book. So they are included in the method. If you don't play the piano, we have recordings that you can also use. We have CDs and cassettes that are pop-style accompaniments. Anyone use those? Anyone here use the rock-powered accompaniment you use when you're teaching? And they really add a new spice, a new dimension to the beginners. But you notice what the percussion was doing kind of related to what the piano's doing. It helps out. Let's look over on page 5, please. The bottom of page 5, lines 6 and 7, it's a first duet. Now the students have only been playing, a couple of weeks. They have a limited amount of material, but I think it's important that they immediately get into playing harmony, to play something other than just melodies together. We like to play the first duet. The woodwinds are going to play line 6, and the brass are going to play line 7. 1, 2, ready, and... whole notes and half notes, full value to the notes. A whole note that starts on beat 1 does not end until beat 1 of the next measure. There's a lot of places to do that. And this is nothing more than thirds. They're playing, G, E, F, D, etc. But it's creating music right away. It's creating something that has harmony, that has some depth to it. You turn over the page, please. Page 6, we now introduce quarter notes. Look at line number 2. We're going to play line number 2 for you. Try it again, and I would say to this band that a quarter note that starts on beat 1 ends on what beat? 2. And a half note that starts on beat 1 ends on what beat? 3. So that we're talking about the full value of the quarter note and half note. Let's play it again. 1, 2, ready, and play. Sequentially throughout the method book, we'll be playing single strokes, will work themselves into flams, eventually into 5-stroke rolls, 9-stroke rolls, roughs, and so on. But the sequence of the rhythms in the percussion are accelerated from the rest of the band. For instance, in book 1, the wind instruments only learn half note, whole note, quarter note, eighth note, dotted quarter followed by an eighth followed by a dotted quarter. Percussion also learns sixteenths, dum da da dum da da dum, dig a dum, dig a dum, dig a dum, so that they can incorporate that into developing roles. And you know, we can go into a long discussion on how to teach percussion. I have to be a percussionist, and I can only say that there are many different approaches, and there are some new methods out that use a lot of different techniques that may or may not work well. I do believe quite strongly in teaching measured rolls and in teaching kids to play 5-stroke rolls and 9-stroke rolls. There's a real place for that. As I go out and listen to drummers, whether they be drum set players, whatever, that I find that the more outstanding players are those that have a real firm rudimental background. I think it's an essential part of playing. I do this, you can also do this, play any way you want to. But the techniques are there, and I just would say you might want to look very carefully at the percussion books in the Yamaha band students. I think teachers that are using the method tell me that one of the things they really like about it is that the percussion is kept active, and there's a lot for them to do, and they progress, you know, at a comfortable pace. There are, in fact, 3 percussion books available. One which is snare drum, bass drum, and accessories. So for every line of music, it's a snare drum part with a bass drum part, and sometimes we add suspended cymbal, woodblock, tambourine, triangle, kind of the way we would in a band arrangement. Secondly, there's a keyboard percussion book, which is not just a reprint of the flute book, but it's written for keyboard percussion, 2.5 octave little instrument that you might use with a beginner. And thirdly, there's a book that takes those two and puts them together, what we call combined percussion. So if you're teaching kids to start with snare drum and bass drum and simultaneously with mallets, how many of you do that? Raise your hand. Quite a few. So if you're teaching that and you have the facilities to do it, then you would use that combined book. I would also recommend, if we're on the subject of percussion, that you have a lot of practice pads around so the kids get to play. Even when the band's playing and you don't want 8 snare drums playing, you have the ones that aren't playing on the snare drum in a rehearsal playing on practice pads. So you keep them busy, because it's so frustrating for band kids to sit there and do nothing. And really only happens with percussionists. It doesn't happen with a clarinet player. They're playing all the time. But the percussionist, if you only have a limited amount of equipment, give them a chance to play all of the time. On page 7, at the bottom of the page, there's a line called Just 4. Now you're looking at a clarinet book, and it's pretty obvious to you as an experienced band director why that Just 4 is there. It's there because we're learning the note A, and there's going to be a problem with that kid going from A to E or A to D. Prior to that Just 4 on the page, they're always making direct motion from A to G or A to F, which is not so bad. But when they try to go to A to E, it's a little bit of a problem. So we give them that special exercise. Each instrument in the band has their own special exercise. Listen to the flutes play their Just 4. Flutes, Just 4. 1, 2, ready, and. Recognizing that there are some fingering combinations in the beginning flute players. You got B flat, C, D, E flat. You've got some tricky things, so you get further practice on it. Trumpets, play your Just 4. 1, 2, ready, and. Harder than this, they go from B to D, and also that they have to play C and G, which are open notes with the same finger. Same thing applies to the French horn. Now, actually the French horn book is a double book. That doesn't mean it's written for double horn. It means that there are 2 pages. For every page of music in the method, there are 2 versions for the French horn. One version is what we call the unison page. So they're playing in unison with the band. The opposite page are the same melodies, but they're written in the same key as the trumpets. So instead of the first 6 notes being written F through D, as they are in a typical horn book, they're C through A, C, D, E, F, G, A. Because you know, the concert pitch, the first 6 notes of the book are B flat through G. So your beginning horn's going F through D. It's either too high or it's too low. It's always, or you got them skipping 7ths all the time. So they have this alternate page. Now they can play those alternate pages with the band, and then you have everything sounding in fourths and fifths. Now some band directors tell me they like to do that because it helps train that kid's ear, because a French horn player better develop a good ear. Or they have them play the unison pages in band, and then take the alternate pages and use those at home. Now the horns have a challenging just four here. Horns, could you play that for us? You're just four, starting on a low C. They're playing C, E, G, all open notes. 1, 2, 3, and then they do B. Back to E, ear they have, because somebody hits that C and they're out of tune before they adjust it just like that. That's because they've received good training. And it's pretty uncommon to have 5 horns at the 8th grade that you can play in unison as well as that. I'd like to take them along with me. They sound terrific. So that's the just 4 concept, which continues throughout the book. It's not meant as an obstacle. There are some books that have like special pages for instruments that become obstacles because they're so extremely difficult, kids get frustrated. These just 4 lines are there just to let you know that we recognize that in a band method where everyone's playing in unison, you're kind of mistreating some instruments along the way. And this is an opportunity to give them a little extra help. And the percussion is very much helped in the just 4s. That's where they learn paradiddle, that's where they learn flam, all things like that. Well, I'm playing flams. Let me just give you my philosophy about playing flams. I find, when I go out and guest conduct, kids messing up flams all the time, so trying to do this, you know? The whole thing, flam is the easiest rhythm in the world to play. You have two sticks, one's down and one's up. Those 2 sticks move at the exact same speed. Make a perfect flam every time. And if the kids try to do this, they try to go pa-tum, pa-tum. But they just have to get them like that. And that's why, you know, we think that the drum corps concept is maybe just a little too rigid and we do it for show. We don't do it at all for show. We do it so that we get precision. So we have 2 sticks, different heights, moving same speed, get a perfect flam. And when you reverse it, it goes like this. And then you're set to do flam taps. Flam tap, flam tap, flam tap. And from the first time that you teach flams, if you teach this, you'll never have any problems after that. All the other stuff, all the other rudiments that are flam related will clean up just like that. It's because what happens is we feel, well, they're first learning flams, as long as they get 2 sticks and kind of almost hit the drum, it'll be okay. The other thing with percussion that drives me crazy, it didn't happen with this band, is keeping sticks right in the center of the drum. The snare drum is meant to be played in the center 90% of the time. Special effects towards the rim. You're going to play a buzz roll towards the rim. But the sound of the drum, that's the best sound, is the center of the drum. Okay. Dan, turn over to page 9. Page 9. One of the things in the Yamaha band student that separates it from other methods is the fact that it is loaded with band music. There are 4 full pages of band arrangements that are written just for the kids in the method book. There's no supplements needed. There's no divisi needed. There's a flute part, there's a clarinet part, there's a trumpet part, and it takes whatever material they know and then it does a band arrangement. The first one's on page 9. It's Jingle Bells. We're going to play Jingle Bells. Rhythmically, they're all pretty much together. The next piece on the page, the Victor's March, takes it one step further and actually has a bass line that's pretty challenging. Can I have the bass line? All the people that play the bass part in the Victor's March. 1, 2, ready, and. 1. Have everyone play. Listen for that bass line. That's separate from the melody. Everyone, Victor's March. 1, 2, ready, and. Last night. I'm sometimes overwhelmed by this, but the fact is that this past September, there were over 500,000 students that began their musical career with the Yamaha Band Student worldwide. And all of them, I'm sure, have played this march on a concert. And just the thought of putting them all together in this giant coliseum to play was just overwhelming. Because I had more band directors come up to me and say, boy, my Christmas concert was great this year because we had some music to play. And the first year that I taught elementary band, I had my 5th and 6th grade band play a concert, and I didn't include my 4th graders. And those kids were devastated. They said, Mr. O'Reilly, how come we didn't get to play at the concert? And what I thought was, we didn't get to play at the concert because we didn't have any music that you could play yet. And which was the truth. But the next year, I made sure that I wrote out some little arrangements that they could play based upon the material in their lesson book. And that's all this is. It's just a band piece that they can play without playing any 8th notes, just whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, concert B flat through A flat, and that's it. We're going to skip to the next band piece, which is the Bach Musette over on page 16. I'd like you to hear what that sounds like. Habit that I've had since I was teaching in elementary school, and that is whenever I conduct the band in a piece of music like a performance, I make sure I pick up a baton, because what it does for me is it transforms me from teacher to conductor. I get upset when I go out and watch elementary bands or middle school bands and the conductor does nothing more than just kind of click off a tempo and kind of goes through the motions. I think that we have to conduct. If we want to get expression, we want to get dynamics, we want to have some excitement in music, we have to conduct. And what happens is we're so used to teaching, where we're always counting things off, we're walking around the band, that we kind of do the same thing when we play music. And so I always had a baton handy, and I try to make it a point whenever we're going to rehearse a piece of band music, rather than just teaching out of the book, I would pick up that baton and psych myself into being Mr. O'Reilly the conductor, rather than Mr. O'Reilly band teacher, and that's something that always worked well for me. We're going to skip ahead in the book. At the very end of each book, there is a solo for individual instruments, and there's a clarinet solo, there's flute solo, trumpet solo, trombone, etc. And we have the pleasure, we have Elizabeth who's going to play a flute solo for you today. You don't have it in your book, you're going to play. It's a sonatine, Louis sonatine, and I have the pleasure of accompanying her at the piano. as band directors is sometimes we do focus too much on, quote, the band. And part of the Yamaha course of instruction involves solos and ensembles, which I think is really a critical part. For beginning band concerts, no need to have the whole band play. You can have little soloists, you can have some ensemble. And we're going to skip over to the ensemble book now. In that packet you have is book 1 of the ensembles. And there are 3 levels of these ensemble books. I would encourage you to seek them out, and we're making a choreography change here. My cohort, Sally Holbrecht, told me how to do this. We got the band switching around. And we're going to bring some ensemble people up to the front. And the 3 levels of the ensembles correlate exactly with the 3 levels of the method book. And if you'll look with me on page 7, or no, excuse me, page 4 of your ensemble book. Page 4 of your ensemble book. I have a score here. The score is basically set up as a concert score with parts A, B, and C, and then percussion and a piano accompaniment. Each book is the same, so that as this band has a set of these books handed out. I said, band, turn to page 4, Star Chase, let's all play line A. In unison. Everyone, whether it's tuba, piccolo, flute, bassoon, alto, clarinet, doesn't matter. Everyone has the same thing. If I said part B, same thing. Then as they divide up into parts, you can do it with any combination of instruments you want. So they're just play this as an ensemble. They're divided, pre-assigned to parts. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.